Hello everyone. It's been a while. I'm not feeling the chill music today. I think I'm gonna have to switch it up. This is a bit. Get something a little more cheerful. Go to the chip tune. So the pattern I'm working on is called Dr. G's Memory Vest. It's a vest I'm making for my partner, for my husband. And I'll show you what it looks like on Ravelry. I've got a screen grab if you want to have a look. So it's just a men's cabled vest. I'm doing it out of some Joe Sharp Silk Road Aran. No, Silk Road DK. Actually, let me grab a ball. Yeah. So this is the yarn. Joe Sharp Silk Road DK Tweed. So it is technically I guess an Aran weight. It'd be a light Aran weight or a worsted, I guess, in American parlance. It's a DK here, but if you look at the needle size, it recommends, where do we have the needle size? Did I miss it there? Yeah, it recommends 5mm needles, which is normally you'd expect for an Aran weight. And the pattern's written for an Aran weight, so that's why I'm using it. I bought a packet of 10 balls a few years back at a D-stash for the New South Wales Knitters Guild. And so the pattern I really like. I like knitting cables. But the other thing is it as you might have seen there, you get it by donating to Alzheimer's research. So it's really nice. And obviously Dr. G was the person that Kristen Kapoor designed it for. So I've been working on this for a little while now. What row am I up to? 10. So I'll spread it out for you here in a moment and show you what it looks like. Kind of hard to see it because I'm on the circular needle. I'm knitting it in the round and it's bunched up. But as you can see, there's a central motif, which is, it's like a tree, I guess. So that goes up the center of it. And then either side, you've got panels of they're 2x2 cables. So each one is 4 stitches, 2 twisting over each other in opposite directions, mirrored. And then you've got this sort of ladder design up the middle as well. And then at the sides, there's just stocking stitch. And each of the motifs, and you can see I'm using stitch markers to sort of delineate them, each one is set off by a column of twisted knit stitches against purls, which is why these rows really kind of pop out. The twisting does that. It also had twisted rib at the base, so the knit stitches there are all twisted as well, which is why it sort of is it makes the knit stand out against the purls a little more than a normal knit stitch would. So there's 3 charts for the pattern. There's a chart for the tree, a chart for the cables, and a chart for the ladder. And I'm just working my way up the body now. So the blue stitch marker is the start and end of my round. So this is, so I've just got to do the twisted stitch now. So that's the border between the panels, and then a purl. And then here's the cabled part. I've actually just done the cable twist. So it'll be 4 or 5 rounds before you get to see me do that particular cable. So stay tuned for that. So I'm using the Denise interchangeable needles, which I haven't used in years. But the pointiness of them, despite the fact they're plastic, the pointiness is pretty good, which is useful when you're doing the cables like I'm doing. Here's the ladder section, so I'm on a knit row there. And so the pointiness of them is quite good. The problem is, you know, they're plastic and with sort of a rubbery cable. They just twist to click on, but what you can see is this little, if you can, that looks like it's been sticky taped. It's because it has. It popped off on me like 3 or 4 times the other day when knitting. And so I actually just sticky taped it, the needle to the cable, because I couldn't be arsed picking out finding a similar size needle and transferring all the stitches. I guess I'm just being stubborn about it. It would be more enjoyable if I moved it to a different needle, but damn it, I started on this needle, so I'm gonna continue. All right, so the yellow is the other side seam. So I'm on the stocking stitch part now. I kind of really got to, like the rubbery cable, you really got to kind of pull the stitches around it. They don't slide. I guess because it's that sort of rubberiness, plus it's kind of thick, they don't slide the way they do on a thinner cable. You know, if those Chiago people want to give me a nice interchangeable say in exchange for a review, I'd be very happy to do that. Look at me. Soliciting endorsements. Okay, so ready to start the second side. So 2 purls, and notice I kind of, whenever I switch from a knit to a purl, I give it an extra tug. I'll show you. So I'll do the twisted stitch here, and then I go and then I tighten and I pull it around to do the purl, and I actually always sort of give it an extra tug. I just find that when you switch from a knit to a purl, sometimes there's a bit of looseness there, and so I like to tug it to tighten it up a bit. It's probably one of my tension knitting cables is always a lot tighter than it is just on, see I do that central knit purl stitch, I pull that as well. I tend to knit cables just a little bit tighter than I do normal knitting, and I mean it helps the design sort of pop and stand out, I find anyway. So there's a purl, and again you see it kind of, you get that sort of loose bit, and so that's why I just like to, you know, tighten it up a little. And then this is the ladder. I'm wearing cables as well, as you can see. So this one that I'm wearing is St. Bridget from, is it Alice Starmore? I think it's Alice Starmore. Knitted many years ago, and that is actually in the actually that's Joe Sharp Silk Road as well, but that is the true Aran, the Silk Road Aran tweed. So it's thicker than the one that I'm knitting with right now. So it actually knitted up quite quickly, despite being so elaborate with the cables. So I've got the stitch markers such that I know that pretty much whenever I get to one, that's where I have to do a twisted stitch. There's that purl, and again, Just tighten it up. If you have any questions or you want to say hello in the chat, please do. All right, I'm onto the tree. And I'm sort of at the boundary where, you know, I've just finished the third tree, so I'm kind of ready to, I'm starting the fourth tree. They stack on top of each other. Hang on a second. Done one stitch wrong. Right. That should be a knit stitch right there because it's the start of the next tree branch. It's not that complicated of a pattern. It's just that the tree motif is 20 rows long, but the ladder and the cables are 8. So you got to kind of remember, like I'm on row 30, so I know that means I'm on row 10 of the 20 stitch repeat and row 6 of the 8 stitch repeat. It gets a little bit tricky. I do have an app on my phone with a stitch counter, which is where I've been keeping track, but I'm using my phone as the camera that you're seeing right now, so I'm using a bit of paper for now to keep track. I've been keeping this on my desk, and you know, when I'm in a video conference or something for work, I'll pull it out and just do a row while I'm listening to a meeting. Okay. Blue stitch marker means I have completed one round. That took like probably 15 minutes. That's why it's slow going. All right, that's row 30 done. Row 31. So the odd numbered rows are the more interesting ones for you to see because that's where I have some cable crossing and things like that happening. So this should be a little more interesting, this row. So obviously this vest, the front and the back are the same, at least at the bottom bit. You know, eventually it'll split for the V, but for now, it's the same on both. All right, there's my twisted stitch border and then a purl. Okay, and now I'm on the cable section. And for the cable part, I'm gonna do what I need to do on my, can I just zoom out? Like the annoying thing is the charts are on different pages of the pattern, so I want to see them at the same time. There, I can just zoom out and see them at the same time. That's better. That's a PDF pattern. Okay. So row 31 will be row 7 on the cable. Hey, Jody! How was Hamilton? Oh my gosh, are you back? My friend Jody went to see Hamilton back in Sydney today, which is, you know, the only place in the world that seems to be having live theater at the moment. Lucky her. Oh, hi, Cass. Did he love it? I bet he loved it. Twisted Stitch, Purl. Yeah. Well, the time we went forward and the time in Australia went back, which means there's now only an 8-hour time difference. So I should be able to catch up a bit more with the Aussies. It's easier now. Cassidy said it was great. Well, I bet. What was his favorite song? Was it The King? The King songs are pretty good. It'll be a long time before we see any theater here in Germany. All right, so I'm on the tree part, and so I've got a cable coming up. So row 11. So I've got one purl stitch. Okay, now I need to do I'm doing a little, I mean, it's a cable, but it's not really. Basically, you see here I've got a knit stitch on the needle and then a purl. I need to switch those. So I need to hold the knit stitch at front, purl the purl, and then knit the knit. But I'm going to do that without a cable needle. So I'm actually going to catch the purl stitch on the back with my needle, hold with my thumb, and slide them both off. And now I can put the knit back on the needle and the purl. And so as you can see, all I've done is I've just reordered those two stitches. And the idea is this is that diagonal branch line going up. So the knit stitch is going to travel slowly to the left. So now I can do the purl stitch, and then I can do the knit stitch. And there you go. Our purl stitches are sliding to the left. He likes the song when Philip was playing piano with his mother. Oh, that's sweet. The Un, deux, trois, concert. Yeah. Oh, that's very nice. And then the other interesting part about the tree is the central trunk is slipped every other row. So actually what I do on this is it tells me to move the wool to the back, slip the stitches if to purl, wool back to the front. So by slipping it every other row, that's what makes the trunk, you know, there's half as many stitches on the trunk, which is why it kind of stands up. Really cool. It was weird being in a theater full of people, even with masks. But was it full or did they have you spread out? Okay, and now I need to move that knit stitch. So again, I've got the knit stitch and a purl, but obviously this branch is going up and to the right. So I'm going to be doing the knit stitch first. I'm going to put my wool to the back. I'm going to catch the knit stitch, and then I'm going to again rearrange these. Much, much faster than picking up a cable needle and sliding it and putting it down and losing it in the, dropping it on the floor or the couch cushions. And there we go. We've moved that knit stitch one to the left and this knit stitch one to the right. No empty seats. Wow. And the Australian cast, I'm assuming, were amazing. Did it take on any interesting resonance having, you know, because obviously casting it in Australia, they cast Indigenous people in it. So did that add anything to it, or it'd be an interesting flavor, you know? I guess if, you know, that makes it a story of immigrants and indigenous people in Australia fighting against, a white color. That would be a very, very interesting optics in Australia. A mix of indigenous and people of color from all over, yeah. Okay, and that's one side done. They were so good. We had the understudy for Burr. He really built into the role. Oh, cool. I saw the Cursed Child in Melbourne. I follow them on Instagram. The Harry Potter and the Cursed Child has also relaunched, and they've got some new people stepping in because it's like the third year technically for that show, and so they've got new people stepping into the cast. I saw. Now, I saw some pictures, Jody. Is it smoky in Sydney? Are there fires happening? I saw people sharing pictures of smoke, and I wasn't sure if it was bushfire situation. They're all putting their stamps on the roll. It's like 5 to 6 weeks into the... Yeah, I remember it because they only just started up again, so... I remember the excitement when the tickets went on sale. Yes, there was some smoke today, but not sure why. Interesting. We're expecting snow again today. It's nearly May and it's still snowing. Oops. On the tree part, I'm doing the wrong thing. What am I doing? It's time for my cable. All right. So this is my knit stitch that needs to move to the left. So again, the pattern would say, slide the next stitch onto the cable needle and hold it front. So I'm going to actually do the opposite. I'm actually going to, because if you think about it, if that stitch is coming to the front, that means this stitch, that's effectively what I'm doing. It's kind of at the front there. So now when I slide them both off, and notice I'm using my thumb at the base to keep them from unraveling. That's effectively what I've done. The knit stitch is in front. I can then put it onto the needle and then switch them around. Hazard reduction. Ah, I see. So they're burning some of the old dead waste. Okay, and then there's our completed one stitch cable. I mean, it's really just a traveling stitch. Okay, we're up to that center of the tree trunk. So knitting wool to the back, slip, wool back to the front. Oh, hang on. Oh, there's my knit stitch. So this is where I need to travel to the right. So again, it would say slide the next stitch to a cable needle and hold at the back. So I'm going to go to the opposite and spear the next stitch to the front. And then when I rearrange them, you kind of got to visualize it. All right, if I'm holding the next stitch at the front and knitting the one from behind, that means that that stitch is going to the left. So you kind of got to visualize it in your head and then rearrange them on the needle. I do this for sort of, I wouldn't do it for a huge cable because then you run the risk of dropping them. But for anything up to like 6 stitches, I don't bother with a cable needle. Aw, it's nice to hear from you as well, even if it's only on text. I hadn't done this in a while. The last few weeks, last weekend I was, I gave a talk and a meetup on Tuesday night about my machine learning stitch identification, and I wanted to build out a new demo for it, and so I spent all of last week either procrastinating that or actually doing that, and so I didn't do any knitting. It's been a couple weeks since I've streamed any knitting, and so this morning I was going to do something else, and I thought, you know what, if I start now, it's early enough that maybe some of my Australian friends will come on and say hello. All right, there's the blue. That means that is row 31 finished. You doing the I-cord, miles of I-cord, I assume, Jody? I saw the picture on Facebook this morning. 31. That's looking nice. Yeah, the procrastinating takes a lot of time. The great news is that once I actually did it, it was a lot easier. The last time I ran that machine learning job was end of 2019, like a year and a half ago, and so much has changed. And I basically got comparable results in like a fraction of the time, and it was so much easier to use. So that was a nice result. And so I was able to sort of build into my presentation comparing and contrasting the two approaches, which worked well. All right, so I'm on row 32, which is divisible by 8, so that is row 8 on the, okay, so still not at the cable cross yet. One more row to go before I get to cross the cables. You're sitting with your feet up and stretched out. We'll do some I-cord after Cassidy's med. Hey, Woban, I wondered if you'd pop in as well. Great to see you. Yeah, the result was really cool. And so I had asked for, I saw a great AIML talk at an internal event a few months back, presented by one of our sort of like VPs of machine learning. Like, this guy's like a PhD, really brilliant. And I actually reached out to him and told him about my little experiment with knitting. And he was super intrigued by it. And he shared his slides with me, so I was able to include some of his material in my talk. And so I messaged him the other day to tell him that I'd done my demo and given my talk, and I shared my slides back with him. And He was really tickled by it. He said he likes collecting unusual uses of machine learning and identifying knitting stitches qualified. Oh, hi, Cass. I can only hear you if Mom types it. What is it today, Woban? Knitting, weaving. What did I see you were doing the other day that was interesting? It wasn't tatting or something like that, was it? You do a lot of different fibercraft. All right, so this is now just a plain row on the tree. So no cable on the even rows, just knitting and purling. It's more a broadcast. That's right. I am doing this like live cast, but it's only one way. It's like TV. Cross stitch. That's what I saw you doing. Drop spinning. Jody does a bit of drop spinning too, actually. All right, so the center stitch on this, I actually just knit it now. Yeah, spinning is something I'm going to continue to avoid. It's another hobby. I'll be more likely to take up weaving before I take up spinning. Drop spinning is pretty compact. That's true. Although I'm sure the tatters would argue with you there. I saw Jody, the D-Stash is coming up. I bought this at a D-Stash. I don't remember who I got it from, but it was from the Inner West, the Inner City D-Stash several years ago, I believe. I know I bought some for Reese. It might have been from her. But it's been years since she was there, so that would have been a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, I didn't renew my guild membership this year, but I get some of the emails, but yeah, I don't know. Woban, are you a member? You're Victoria, right? Are you a member of any of the Victorian guilds? Or are you Sydney? I can't remember. You missed the last meeting. Oh, wow. You're Sydney. Oh, well, you should be a member of the Inner City group. They're the best. Although they have technical difficulty these days with the emails. Used to be second Saturday of the month, I think. I think they're actually back to in-person meetings now, aren't they? That's really cool. It's also our Thursday night knitting group. I might be able to do. I realized this Thursday that like I could have dialed into it because 8 hours now. That's just when I get up in the morning. But I had meetings. But I'll try and make it on some of the Thursday night knitting again. That would be fun. Are they? Oh, what? Actually, I don't know. Is it still on Zoom or are people doing it in person? If it's in person, I can't join in. We could, do this like together one of these times, Jody. I can actually, call you on video conference and then put you on and we could both knit and talk at the same time. Wouldn't that be fun? I'll have to pick a day when it's a good time. I'm going to be launching a work-related Twitch show here in the next few weeks, highlighting women builders who've built something on AWS. So just, there's plenty of shows where people sort of talk through an application or an architecture they've built. I'm just going to do one that features all women. I went through some of the existing ones we have and found that, people are trying to be more representative. Could be better. So I'll do it. Oh, that'd be kind of fun. Do a little She Builds Twitch show. Got a list of people lined up for it. That'll be during the week, though, not on weekends. And I won't do it on the Knitting with Kris channel. It'll be on. I have a work-related channel. What do I call my work channel? I think it's Kris _@_work, something like that. I will tweet it, of course, when I do it. It's something like that. I finally, that's why I renamed this channel, because I figured I'd best separate them. I'll let you know, Woban. I'll mention it on here, I'm sure. I'm not ready to do it next week, so I will mention it and get a URL. I need to I want to build out like a little landing page for it. Just trying to get the branding elements from the program owner in Australia. Okay, this is the end of row 32. Row 33, and row 33 is a cable crossover row, so excitement. You finally get to see the cables cross properly. All right, let me get up to the cables. Teased everyone with cables, and then it's taken 45 minutes to actually get to the cable row. All right, so that's a knit and then a purl. All right, you go get Cass ready for bed. It was great to see you. Thanks for popping in. All right, so I'm up to the cable section. So you can see the next 4 stitches are the cable. And if we sort of just look at this conceptually, oh, all right. So you can see it's twisting, the left part is twisting over to the right part for this one. So that means these two, so if you just look at these 2 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 need to come on top of 3 and 4. So I need to arrange them. So these 2 are going forward and these 2 are going backwards. You can see that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle into stitches 1 and 2. And this is where that pointy tip comes in handy because I kind of, you see I'm kind of digging in there. So I've got it through the front of those 2 stitches. And now, hold your breath. Like I said, I'm pinching, I'm sliding all 4 off the needle. And now I'm going to rearrange. I'm going to put those 3 and 4 on, and I'm going to pull 1 and 2 around. And if I rearrange them all, you see what I've done? I've just rearranged those 4 stitches. And you can tell, that way you can tell the cable's twisting the right direction. And now I just knit all 4 of them. That's all cables are. I think people think cables are magic. They're literally just rearranging the stitches before you knit them. And, you know, patterns will tell you to use a cable needle as if it's some, you know, important and critical implement. Here, I'll actually do one. I don't even think I have a cable needle, but I'll use another knitting needle and show you what it, actually I do have a cable needle. Hang on. Look at that. Look, I have a whole bag of cable needles that I never use, because why would you bother? But I'll do one with a cable needle, and look, they come, that's a stitch holder. Cable needles come in sort of different sizes and shapes. So several of them have that sort of bump in them, which helps them keep from sort of sliding out on you. These are all sort of stitch holders and cable needles. But yeah, I'll use this thick one. So if I were gonna do the cable as written normally, what this next one would tell me, and so again, we look at the next one, this is twisting the opposite direction. So these 2 stitches are going to come to the front, and the 2 go to the back. So what the pattern would tell me is slide the next 2 stitches to the cable needle, and then you can kind of put them on the little V. Now knit the next 2, and then knit the 2 off the cable needle. This is accomplishing exactly the same thing as I just did by rearranging, but it's like it takes me twice as long, and it involves this other tool, and it's awkward. Why would I do that? That is, you know, same result, but like way more of a pain. So I don't know how I learned about the technique. I read a reference to it somewhere, and so I just Googled cable without cable needle. And found some blog post where someone described the technique, and it was just like a light bulb. This is also the ladder row. So for the ladder part here, I'm just going to purl across the whole thing. That's what gives me those purl ridges across the ladder section. There we go. But we've got 2 more cables to do. And so again, just to compare, I'll do these 2 without the cable needle. Whoops. Stitch marker, stay on. So twisted stitch, purl. So again, all we have to do is just be careful of which way it's twisting. There's a little bit of vegetable matter in this yarn. So I know that these 2 need to come over these 2. So I put, and you kind of just have to visualize it in your head. Grab those 2, slide all 4 off, rearrange them, and then knit them. So much faster and less awkward than using the cable needle. Yeah, I use the cable needle. Woven says I use the cable needle when cabling a lot of stitches. Yeah, if it was like an 8-stitch cable, like maybe 4 and 4, I would think about it. Because, you know, that with a lot, you know, you're trying to keep a lot of stitches from sliding off and dropping, like I probably would as well. But I think up to 6, I feel pretty confident using without the cable needle. All right, so this one's twisting the other way, so I'll go from the back. Rearrange. And you gotta not be afraid to kind of stretch stretch the stitches when you're rearranging them. Like that happens with cables. That's why cable tension ends up being a little tighter as well, because when you're rearranging the stitches, they tighten up. There you go, there's our two cables. All right, and now we've got to do the bit where we move this knit stitch one stitch to the left. Now there are ways of doing this. I know when you've got just a 2-stitch cable, you don't even have to rearrange them. You can actually knit them, depending on whether they're knits and purls, you know, you can actually knit them out of order. But I don't think I can do that because I need to purl this one and knit this one, so I've got to rearrange. Purl, knit, and that travels that stitch over one. Center stitch, remember, wool to the back, slip, wool to the front. Slide them down. That join is so crappy, even before I sticky taped it. Yeah, these stupid needles kept breaking on me the other day, so I literally sticky taped it together. All right, and now this stitch is moving to the right. So again, rearrange. And there we go. And yeah, it's a little bit wobbly, but you know, once it's washed and blocked, they'll the sort of stretchiness of the tension will come out. You can see there's my little tree taking shape. I like the way the branches come out of the ribbing. That's kind of fun. Yeah, those 1-stitch cables get a little bit wobbly, some of the stitches, but I'm assuming once I wash and block, they'll straighten out a bit better. All right, this, you know, on certain rows of this pattern, you've got like a dozen cable crosses to do. And then the purl in the middle. And again, I tighten that up. I just find it easier to think about the cables conceptually as opposed to literally, you know, following the instructions literally. Hold this at front, then knit these. Like, you just think about what it's actually doing. It's just rearranging the stitches. Okay, ladder is a purls all the way across. More cables. You can fix a miscrossed cable after the fact. It involves dropping all of those stitches down and then rearranging them before you pick them all the way back up to the top. It can be done, but it's painful, she says from experience. Best to just check each time you do a cross that they're correct. Okay, we're at the side seam again. Another 6 cable crossings coming up. I can see a few people just joined the stream, so what I'll do on this first lot of cable crossings is I'll do the comparison again. So twist a stitch, purl, and that brings us to the cable. So if you have a look at these 2 cables, so what we've got is a 4-stitch cable that's just twisting on itself 2 by 2, mirrored in each direction. So the pattern, the way the pattern is written, you use a cable needle, which can look like this. Sometimes they're shaped like a U, sometimes they're just straight, but it's a little extra needle. And so what this pattern would tell me is to slip the next 2 stitches to a cable needle, all right, and hold at the back of the work. So that means I would put it behind the needle and leave them hanging. So you drop it. And that's why it's got that little bump, because it helps the needle stop from sliding right out. It's going to tell me to knit the next 2 stitches on the needle. And then it's going to tell me to knit the 2 from the cable needle. So now I have to sort of pull the cable needle back around, get the stitches to the end, and knit them. That's the traditional way of knitting a cable. The pattern will tell you, slide stitches to a cable needle, hold at the front or back, blah, 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 blah. It's a pain. It's awkward. Let me do the other one the same way, just so you can see. So on this one, it would tell me to hold them at the front. So again, slide the next 2 stitches to the cable needle, leave it at the front, knit the next 2 stitches, and you see I've got to sort of work around that, and it's like awkward. And now I've got to knit the 2 from the cable needle. So get it to the end, knit the 2 from the cable needle. And so we've got 2 cable crosses happening. Annoying. So I will show you very shortly a better way. Just get across this little ladder motif, which is all purling. You can see, I mean, it looks nice. That's a cable. A cable is just holding some stitches at the front or at the back and really just reordering them. Okay, and that brings us to the next cabled motif. All right, gonna leave the cable needle. No cable needle. Forget it. Instead, so remember what it did have us do. It told us to slide the next 2 stitches and hold them at the back and then knit the 2 after that. So what I'm gonna do is actually use the tip of my needle. I'm gonna grab those 2 stitches from the front, and that's where you need kind of a pointy needle to really dig in there and get your needle into them. I'm now gonna slide all 4 of these stitches off, and I'm gonna rearrange them. And that's scary, but I'm kind of pinching it, you see, so they're not gonna go anywhere. So I'm gonna slide all 4 off, they're off the needle, and I'm gonna put the tip back through the first 2. And remember, holding those 2 at the back effectively means that I'm gonna knit these 2 first. So I've just rearranged them. Look, I've accomplished the same thing. And now I can just knit across them. So those were the 2, now these 2 would have been the ones on the cable needle. There you go. I've accomplished the same thing without having to put down and pick up and work around another awkward needle. I'll do it again on this next cable. So again, the pattern would tell me to hold these next 2 stitches at the front. So if I sort of in my mind do that, that means they're at the front. I'm going to grab the next 2 stitches from behind. So I've got the tip of my needle through those 2 stitches from the back. And again, I'm going to slide them all off. Boop. And so I can now rearrange them, do the twist, just by rearranging them on the needle, because that's all a cable is. It's knitting the stitches out of order. And so there, I've now got them rearranged and I can knit them from that position. And there you go. We have our cable crosses. Much faster than easier than using that other needle. Again, I would only use a cable needle. Woban and I were just saying if we were using like a very thick cable, a very wide cable. All right, I've got a 1-stitch cable here, so this knit stitch needs to move 1 stitch to the left. So the pattern would tell me, this is what the pattern would say, slip that stitch to the cable needle, hold in front, purl this one, then purl this one. So it means we're reordering them. So I don't need this piece of crap. I'm gonna grab the purl stitch from behind, because look, if you look at the orientation, that means this one is, it's the same as if this knit stitch is in front, and then I reorder. And I can do my purl, and I can do my knit. And that knit stitch has now sort of traveled 1 stitch to the left. Hope that's clear. Hit me up in the chat if you have any questions. The center motif is a slip. Oh, hi, Alizara. Are you doing cables? Is that what you're doing at the moment? If you Google it, that's how I learned it. I Googled cable without a cable needle, and I found a blog post someone did showing it. All right, remember this one, the knit stitch is gonna go 1 stitch to the right. So I'm gonna swap the position of it and this purl stitch. And so just, I mean, even if I don't look at the pattern, I know that the knit stitch needs to come on top of the purl. So that means I need to get it from the front. And I can see that's the way they need to be oriented. And then I just do whatever knitting I need to be doing. Oh, I'm glad it makes sense to you. Yeah, it's a lot. Oh, here I've got another 2. God, this row, I forgot. It's like a dozen cables on this one row. Nah, cables are super easy. For the most part. I remember knitting, and Jody knows this, I did a pair of Kilt Socks from Cookie A, who, it's like Cookie A writes knitting patterns that make knitters feel bad about themselves. And Cookie A had me, you know, these are heavily cabled knee socks, kilt socks, you know? And so you start at the calf, and there was this bit where I had to like knit into the back of like 4 stitches in a row and so you were increasing and cabling at the same time. So it was like knit into the back of the next 4 stitches, then knit into the front of the same stitches. And I couldn't do it. I actually snapped the wooden needles that I was using. I went and switched to steel needles. I couldn't do it. And I honestly struggled with that one instruction. I don't think anyone can do it. I challenge. I have no idea how anyone did that. And then it just occurred to me, I could just do the increase on one row and the cable on the next row, and no one would tell the damn difference because it was in like very fine wool miza anyway. That's the only time a cable has actually made me cry, or made me want to cry. So here's this one. So again, I can tell from the twist that these 2 are twisting over the top of these 2. So I'm gonna grab from behind and then do the twist. But this, a 4-stitch cable, easy peasy. No cable needle necessary. I mean, the other reason cables are daunting is, you know, the patterns are often cryptic with lots of weird symbols with slashes and dots on them. But once you do the first row or 2, you usually get a feel for like, oh, it's just a twist of 2 over 1 to the left. And then you can just do it without having to go through those tortured steps. I mean, what does this say? This says, slip 2 to cable needle, hold in back, knit 2 from cable needle. Like that's scary and intimidating. Versus when you just see it as a rope and go, oh, okay. The left strand of the rope needs to be on top of the right strand. Like, that's how I think about it. This is a rope twisting. And so now, you know, and it's 2 groups of 2 stitches. And this 2 needs to come to the front, and these 2 need to go to the back. And so I can just do that with my needle. And ignore the symbols. I mean, when you're doing a like this, so this St. Bridget, this one I had to pay a lot more attention to the to the chart because when you're moving, just crossing two stockinette bits over each other is easy. When you've got knit stitches traveling against a background of stocking stitch, you've got crosses. That was a lot trickier, and you've got sort of bits that actually end. Yeah, that was actually really confusing. Yeah, I had to pay a lot more attention to that one. This is a very simple cable. So pick a simple cable. All right, so this one, I know that these 2 are gonna come to the front because it needs to twist that way. So I'll just rearrange them. I think also maybe if I were doing very fine cables, but cables are usually done on thicker wool. If you're doing very fine cables, I might also use a cable needle just because the risk of dropping them and trying to get them back on the needle. If it's very fine and using very fine needles, then I might use a cable needle as well. But for chunky wool, you can hang on to that. You're not going to drop it. And this wool it's not like if I drop a stitch, it's going to ladder very far either. It's very chunky and quite tweedy and grabby. All right, that is the most interesting row done. Row 33. So we had, in that single row, we had the cable crosses happening. We had the purl ridge of the ladder, more cable crossings. We got our tree, our 4th iteration of the tree taking shape as the branches go towards the middle, and it just repeats. This is an even row, so even rows much simpler. We just knit the knits and purl the purls, basically. Usually you do not cable on every row. Usually you would only cable every other row. Unless it was a very extreme cable that was... I mean, it might have on this one. On St. Bridget, it might have had cabling every row. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And so this pattern, I was saying before, if anyone's just joined, is called Dr. G's Memory Vest. I'll show you a screenshot of what it looks like on Ravelry. So that's the pattern on Ravelry. It's a worsted 10 ply. I am using Joe Sharp Silk Road Tweed DK, but the tension is actually, I mean, it basically is a light worsted. And if you get it, to get the pattern, you just have to make a donation to Alzheimer's Research, which I thought was really sweet. Oh, got a question. Could you explain the difference between knit in back and knit in the front of a stitch, as well as a purl? Oh, you do the knits in the back, or you're twisting every stitch if you're knitting in the back. So normally, let me just, look, I say normally. There isn't, like traditionally, when you do a knit stitch, there are 2 ways you can do it. You can knit into the front, and so if you look at the way the stitch, let me switch cameras as well. Wrong camera, that camera. All right, so if I'm gonna knit the next stitch, there's the stitch on the needle right there. It's a loop. So when they say knit into the front of the stitch, that's the traditional way of knitting a stitch. you put your tip of your needle to the left of the stitch and stab from front to back. That's the way I describe it. You're stabbing away from yourself and going on the left side of the stitch into it. All right, so that's, and then you knit from that position. To knit into the back of the stitch, which is what I'm doing for each of these columns of twisted stitches, so I'll show you that. So this stitch here is a knit stitch, but it's a twisted knit, which is why it kind of stands out. I don't know if you can tell, it kind of stands out a little bit. I'm knitting into the back of the stitch. So again, the stitch is on the needle, but I'm gonna go to the right and I'm gonna spear that back loop. So I'm still going away from me, but I'm spearing the back side of it. And so when I knit like that, what it's doing is it twists it. Can you see at the base of that stitch? It's just got a little twist to it. And that makes it stand out a little bit. So purl. And the same thing applies to purling as well. So purling into the front of the stitch, which is the traditional way of purling. Purling is from right to left though. So for purl, I put my needle in and I'm stabbing towards me, is the way I think about it. Stabbing towards me. And then I purl from there. To purl into the back of the stitch. So remember, this is the front of the stitch is the leg that's on the side that you're on. The back of the stitch is the bit on the back of the work. So to purl into the back of a stitch, you actually have to go in there. So purling into the back loop is probably the trickiest of the four, because you've really you're stabbing it again towards you, but you're getting it into the back loop. And that's how you do a twisted purl. I mean, yeah, that's what you do. Yeah, so look, when I used to work at a knitting shop in Sydney, 10 years ago, or God, however long it was, occasionally people would come in and they would be like, oops, I was supposed to knit all of those stitches. Like I've just done a mistake, I'll go back. People would be like, oh, my grandma taught me to knit and this is the way she showed me to do it. And they would be knitting into the back of every stitch. And you know what? It's fine. If you like the way it looks, and as long as you're consistent, who cares? It might mean that your thing doesn't look exactly like the picture because every one of your knit stitches is going to be twisted. But if you like it, and there's no, I don't like calling it the correct way of doing it because this is just sticks and string, The correct way is whatever way you like to do it. But if you want to know the traditional way of doing a knit stitch is to stab away from you and I go to the left through the front. And if you kind of look at the stitch, so there's the stitch there. Knitting is going into the center of it from front to back. If you're knitting through the back loop, it happens. It's just gonna twist them. And it might even be that when you come back, like if you're doing stocking stitch, it might even be that when you come back on the purl side, you untwist it. Some people do that. Some people actually do on the back side untwist it when they do the purl. So it might be that you're okay, but if you want to know why, so for this ribbing here is twisted rib, which means that all of the knits are knitted into the back, which means that when you do ribbing Alizar, it probably looks like this, and it's actually a decorative, it's a really nice form of ribbing that kind of, that it doesn't necessarily pull in as much, and it really makes the ribs stand out. But yeah, if you're wondering why some of what you're knitting doesn't look like other people's pictures, that's why. And it's up to you whether you want to adjust that or not. There's often so many different ways of accomplishing the same thing in knitting. But yeah, you'll notice as I'm knitting into the front of the stitch. Oh, and then it's worth talking, what I was talking about before was doing increasing by knitting into the front and back. So for example, here's a knit stitch. So if a pattern tells you to knit into the front and back, you would have trouble with that, wouldn't you? That would probably be a bit confusing. So when a pattern says to increase by knitting into the front and back, The traditional way of doing it is you knit into the front, pull the loop, and then don't slide it off the needle. You bring your needle around and then knit into the back of the same stitch. And that's the way you increase. You make 2 stitches out of 1. Yeah, if you're knitting into the back first and then maybe knitting into the front, it's definitely going to look different, your increase. So your increases would look slightly weird. Not weird. I don't mean to say, I don't want to be, I'm trying to like there's not a problem. They're just going to look different. Woben says you knit combination. So you mean you do that, Woben? You twist on one side and untwist on the other? It's not uncommon. Like, I mean, it's rare. It's not super common, but it's not uncommon. I find that knitting into the front of the stitch is easier. You know, like knitting in there, the needle just wants to slide in. To actually go into the back of the stitch, I actually have to use my finger to kind of make sure I'm actually sliding in, you know? It's not, I mean, you know, the camera. Like that way, easy. This way is a little bit harder. Like I often use my finger to kind of make sure I'm getting into the stitch. Continental, it's a much more straightforward. Yeah, that's the other thing, is if you're knitting continental style, it may well be easier to do one or the other. Yeah. Lots of different ways of doing this stuff. Oh, if you're, okay, knitting continental, so maybe that's, yeah. Because I can knit continental. So if I were doing this continental and I'm on a knit stitch, you're right. It's actually closer for you to go through the back loop. Going through the front is a slightly bigger movement than probably going through the back is for you. So I totally get that. Yeah, knitting in the back is easier. You're right, exactly. It makes sense. So, and knitting in the front is easier for a thrower like I am. That's why that twisted ribbing took me so much longer than normal ribbing to actually like twist every single stitch, but it would have been so much faster and easier for you, see? Just depends on the pattern you're knitting. Yes, there is an old guard of knitting who like to tell people when they do things the wrong way. I don't like that. I don't like that. As long as you get a result that you're happy with, you're doing it the right way. And it's very hard to unlearn this muscle memory. I know that as well. So, you know, if someone's been doing it one way their whole life, telling them they're doing it wrong and to change is not exactly helpful. So if I always knit in the back and I am doing leaning decreases. Yes, decreases. So let me pretend. So let's say these next 2 stitches, let's say the pattern has a knit 2 together. So normally not normally, traditionally when I do a knit 2 together, I go through both of these stitches together from the left, and when I knit them, that decrease we say leans to the right. You can see a little bit, it means that the stitch on the left ends up on top of the stitch on the right, and you get a little decrease that kind of goes to the right. If you're knitting 2 together through the back loop, you're going through these 2 like this, and when you knit them, I don't know if you can tell, you get sort of a twist at the base, and it looks nothing like the knit 2 together through the front. So yeah, if you're wondering why your decreases don't look nicely symmetrical, that would be one reason why, because the knit two together is often paired with like you can do a knit two through the back loop. Again, because of that cross, that's not a usual decrease that you get common in patterns. Normally for a left-leaning decrease, I do an SSK, which is a slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, put the needle back and knit from that position. And that, you can see those two decreases. This one, the left stitch goes over the right and it leans to the right, and this one, the right stitch goes over the left and we say it leans to the left. So they kind of mirror each other, and it looks really nice if you're doing like a raglan seam line or, you know, some fully featured shaping. So yes, you're right. Like in stocking stitch or whatever, ribbing, go for your life, do whatever you like. But if you're wondering why mirrored decreases don't look as they're, you know, supposed to, that will be why. Knitting two together through the back loop. Yep, do the K2 together in front or the SSK. Yep, exactly. There's a really good book I bought on Kindle called Knitting for Anarchists, which is, it's not really a pattern book. It's sort of a book about a philosophy in knitting, which sort of talks about the fact that the idea of there being rules is really kind of stupid. That you do have a lot of an SSK is a knit two together through the back loop. Yes, it is a knit two together through the back loop, but you're twisting each stitch individually before you knit them through the back. So if I do, you know, an SSK, I'm actually reversing. I don't know. Yeah, Eastern mount. I don't use that terminology, but yeah, exactly. Each stitch is individually twisted as opposed to twisting them as a pair. I prefer SSK to sort of slip one, knit one, pass slip stitch over. That used to be a lot of patterns would have you do that, but I find that the SSK is a better match for the knit two together through the front loop. You just have to find what looks good to mirror whatever decrease you're doing. Yeah, you're right. If you do the knit two together in the front and every other stitch is twisted, I don't know. You'll have to experiment and tell us. If every other stitch is twisted, if that would stand out. Maybe it'll stand out in a good way and highlight your decrease. I'm not sure. Exactly. No rules, only techniques. Like in that book, who wrote that book? Let me find that book because it's a good book. Knitting for Anarchists. Anna Zilborg, The What, Why, and How of Knitting. So there we go. I'll put it in the chat. Yeah, if you want to broaden your horizons, like I think it does have some patterns in it. I've never bothered looking at the patterns in it, to be honest with you. It sort of examines some of the conventional wisdom, and I remember particularly, this idea that like tension is the be-all, end-all, and that changing needle size will help you achieve the right tension for a pattern. When really, in terms of the number of stitches per row, it has a lot more to do with just how thick the wool is and how closely it packs together. The size of the needle, if you think about it, really only affects how tall the stitch is. Because once gravity is acting on it, it really is just the thickness of the yarn itself. Like there's stuff like that in there. And so she advocates, if you can't get the bloody tension the pattern says, you're better off adjusting the number of stitches than you are continuing trying to change needle size to achieve it, which was a bit of a light bulb moment for me when I read that, because, you know, I rarely get the tension. I find other people knit so much more loosely than me, and that just adjusting the size of the garment is often a better change for me than changing needle size. It's great that you've noticed it, Alizara. Like a lot of knitting, you know, when you're, I guess it's a little bit like cooking. Like when you're unsure, when you're starting out, you follow the recipe religiously. But when you start to get more experienced, you realize, like, actually, I don't like that combination. Or I think it works better. I'm much more comfortable doing it this way. And you can start to improvise a little bit more, or just do the things that you prefer. Changing stitch numbers can cause more conflict. Yes, I suppose it can. It depends on what you're knitting. Like, I'd much rather on something like this add in an extra 10 stitches into the stocking stitch side at the seams, than swatch 10 times trying to, you know, get the exact right number. When I actually like the tension of the material that I'm getting with a particular size needle. But obviously the point is to be flexible. You know, the more experienced you get, the more you... Yeah, you're a rebel. Good. You know, I guess the idea is you don't have to be a slave to the pattern. I often, you know, I've got so many jumpers I knitted earlier in my career where the damn sleeves are too short. Because I have long arms and broad shoulders. And so I now take sleeve shaping as like a guideline and suggestion, and then knit it the way that actually fits long enough to fit me. Marking all my adjustment in notes on Ravelry. Yes, exactly. Like, that's as well. Definitely Ravelry notes are super helpful. I mean, that, what's the one that I just finally finished? That stupid Rowan one, the Marie Wallen Rowan one. You know, I put all the notes for that, all the adjustments for that, changing it from being a cardigan into a V-neck, and all the alterations I made. I put all of that on Rav. Yeah, that one. I mean, even that one there, the stag pullover from Nora Gone, because my row height, everything, my row height is always shorter than what patterns specify. And it's like, all right, I could go up another needle size, but I liked the firmness of the fabric. It's just that the stag's antlers were going to finish too low on the bust. I just added in extra rows to make the antlers bigger and continue up towards the collar. It's the white one that comes up in slideshow with the stag head on it. You know, I'd much rather do that than spend a lot of time faffing about with trying to get the exact tension. And I tend to knit things that have a bit more ease in them as well. Like, yes, if I were knitting something that was very tailored and meant to fit very closely, obviously I would pay a little bit more attention to it as well. I mean, like, this is a cabled vest, rather thick, that's going to be worn on the outside of other things, so it's going to have quite a bit of ease in it anyway. It's interesting. He's got a long torso as well, so I will definitely make it longer than the pattern suggests. Oh, I'm glad you learned stuff. That's. I can feel like I can be useful. I used to teach classes, you know, and haven't been able to do any of that for such a long time. Row 35. I mean, I'm self-taught as well. None of my family members knit, so I learned from books predominantly. Um, I mean, yes, we had. I think I learned knitting pre YouTube, um, from books. I started with a children's learn to knit book. I remember Peyton's in Australia. Is it Peyton's Learn to Knit? Had pretty good like illustrations of how to do different stitches and things like that. And then after I'd done a few projects on my own, I did a class at what was then called Tapestry Craft in Sydney. I did a couple classes there. I did a class with Liz Gemmell, who is a famous, semi-famous Australian knitting designer. She does a lot of Australiana designs. I've collected a lot of her books over the years. Like she designed a bunch of stuff in the 80s and 90s when picture knitting was much more in. And so, she's got like a Aussie Fair Isle with like little opera houses across it and emu eggs and things like that. And so I did a course with Liz, which kind of was just to verify that the way I had picked up from the books was actually correct. But yeah, YouTube has been a game changer for people in terms of that. I know Woburn, by the way, the New South Wales Knitters Guild are having camp. They're having Knitters Guild camp at Stanwell Tops coming up. And so if you look on their website and join, you get information. But basically, it's a weekend away where they have classes and stuff. I organized camp one year, like several years back. Which was fun, but a ton of work. But yeah, camp's good. Like in the recent years, I doubt it this year because of with COVID, but in previous years, they've managed to get like international people to come out for Knitters Guild Camp. Like they had Nork on. They had Anne, what is her name? I've forgotten her name. But yeah, they've had a couple big international knitting designers who obviously like to come to Australia for a vacation. This year, I'm assuming they won't have anybody international, but that's always fun to do some classes. Crafters on TikTok. That's interesting. Oh, isn't that where you were saying your cross stitch? You learned some new technique from some TikTok cross stitcher recently. Well, I'm going to finish this row and then I'll probably call it a day because I need to switch over to my other craft. So if any of you were around, 2 weeks ago when I was knitting, for many years on my blog, I've done this silly thing where I had an Oscar, guess who's going to win the Academy Awards contest. And the prize, and I don't know how this happened, many years ago this came about, I went through a phase where I was sewing sock monkeys, monkeys made out of socks, stuffed toys. And I would give away one to whoever won the Oscar contest. And then eventually it started where I started making the sock monkeys themed around one of the movies for a year. Like I had the Twilight. No, the first one was the year of Brokeback Mountain. And I had 2 rainbow sock monkeys in cowboy hats and boots. They were gay sock monkey cowboys, and that went a bit viral, and then hundreds of people enter. I did a set of Batman and the Joker one year. I did Black Swan, White Swan sock monkeys with little tutus, and that painted its face like the Black Swan, which was pretty fun. I did Freddy Monkery. He was the most recent 2 years ago. I did Freddy Monkery. I did once I did a set of Twilight. I did like a sparkly Edward monkey, and then I did like Bella, and I did the werewolf with the jean shorts. These were all sock monkeys that I made. They're all on my blog. But I made it so that you could switch out the hair and the accessories on the Bella monkey and turn her into Buffy, and then she would stake the Edward monkey. So that was fun. And this year's monkeys, so I did get so I went through the nominees for the awards this year, and to be honest with you, I haven't actually seen that many of them. And I don't do the contest every year. I need to kind of be inspired to do it. But I was thinking about what works of art gave me the most pleasure last year. And then I had a genius idea for a set of 4 sock monkeys, which is a lot. And they don't have anything to do with movies. I have made the Rose family from Schitt's Creek. And so I need to finish them. I've got David finished, and I will show him to you. I've got Johnny nearly done. I've got Moira nearly done, but I have to make a lot of wigs, of course. And then I still have to do Alexis. But I will, my goal is to finish those today or tomorrow and launch the contest. So I will finish this row, and then I will show you what I've got so far. Because if you were on the stream 2 weeks ago, you would have seen me knitting little Converse sneakers, which are technically baby booties, but are actually the shoes on the David monkey. So it's ridiculous. I've probably spent like $100 on the materials for these stupid monkeys. I'm just gonna give them away to whoever picks the most correct in the contest. But well, the Oscars are on like the 26th or something, so I've got to get it launched this weekend, or there's no time for people to enter. Yeah, the baby shoes are for the David monkey, so I'll show it to you because I'm very proud of him. But I'm sure my husband was like, they don't have any. They're not a movie. I'm like, I know, but name one of the movies this year. And he was like, exactly. So I'm going to make sock monkeys of something that gives me joy. So who knows? Maybe I'll stream a bit of sewing on the sock monkeys. It's mainly sewing at this point. I think I think I've done all the knitting I'm going to do. Oh, you knit on the inside and well, look, you can do that as well. Like I can flip it inside out. And that works. I mean, it's the same effect. And in fact, I've seen that technique mentioned specifically if you're doing Fair Isle in the round, because it means that the floats being on the outside are going to be stretched a little longer. And so they won't, it's a way if you're finding your floats are too tight and are pulling your Fair Isle, by knitting it inside out, you can kind of force the floats to be a little longer. But again, doesn't affect the actual end result on most patterns. Yeah, for stranded. I could have done that on. I can't believe I've worked in that stupid pattern for so long and I've forgotten what it was actually called. What was my stranded one called that I just finished? I have no idea. It's like I've got like PTSD from knitting that damn thing. What was it? Where's my little notebook? Orkney. Yes, Orkney. That one. PTSD from knitting Orkney. Oh, someone left me a comment on it. Oh, that was nice. I haven't looked at it since I put it on Ravelry. And then, God help me, now I follow Marie Wallen on Instagram, and so I see the other pattern she's designed, and I'm like, maybe. No, did I learn nothing from that 7-year epic saga of fail? Like, I got a good project out of it, but maybe I'll just leave it at that. Move on to some other designers for a while. I mean, Pharaoh was addictive because it, changed. I'm honestly getting a little bored with this. Yeah, not realizing it, getting the right side and wrong side mixed up. Yeah. Well, and especially if it's a pattern that specifically tells you, to do something. Actually, if you're going in the round, it doesn't matter. Patterns that usually say finishing with a wrong side, or that's only for flat knitting. Yeah, heels on socks would be the one tricky bit. So as long as you don't get confused on that, doesn't matter if you knit them inside out or not. All right, that's the end of the row. That is row 35. And God, this thing is not growing very fast. He's, like I said, he's got a really long torso, so this is going to be a while to go on that. Let me show you the sock monkeys. Let me grab them. 1 second. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Rose, the sock monkey. So as you can see, he's got his black specs. He's got the lightning bolt black and white jumper, and he's got really cool chucks as well. I was gonna do hair, but I actually think he looks better without hair. I might do some felt eyebrows, even though I don't know that you'll see them against the black. Like, don't really know the point of that. But anyway, there's David. So David is complete. Johnny, I had a lot of fun with. So Johnny still needs his eyes, and he will definitely have eyebrows. But check Johnny out. So Johnny, I actually bought. I spent like $10 on a pattern for a business suit to fit American Girl dolls. Because I tried sort of fashioning my own jacket and it looked terrible. And then I somehow found that American Girl dolls are roughly the size of the sock monkeys. Obviously sock monkeys are weird. Like, they don't really have shoulders, so it doesn't fit perfectly. And obviously on the back, like, it wants to ride up and everything. But you know what? It's fine. It looks good. I've just done almost like, if I open him up, a little dicky for the shirt with some folded down for the collar. But I need to do buttons for his eyes, and then I will sew on a couple buttons for the jacket. He will definitely get dark eyebrows, and then I'll probably leave, because I think that reads as gray hair as well. So then he'll be finished. And then Moira, obviously Moira's going to be all about the wigs. So for the moment, what I have for Moira is a bit of an avant-garde, you know, she's into her avant-garde fashion. So this is sort of sequined-y chainmail kind of over a, you know, I think it feels like something Moira would wear. You know, I went to the fabric store and basically was looking for something with sequins on it, something, you know, sort of monochrome. I lined the top bit with a bit of the extra leftover from Johnny's jacket. And so Moira will have, of course, multiple different wigs. And so I'm going to figure out how I'm going to make the wigs able to be interchangeable. Like what I did in the past was sew a strip of Velcro on. I don't know if I have any Velcro with me. It might have to be with a button. So I'll be finish off Moira. And then the Alexis monkey will be the last one. And so I'm going for the outfit she wears when she sings a little bit Alexis. I have some fabric to make the dress, some felt to make the knee-high boots. And I actually bought and paid for a little necklace, an actual human necklace, a little necklace with a gold A on it for her to wear, which I feel will just be the piece de resistance for Alexis, and she will obviously have long blonde hair too. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. Probably, yeah, they are pieces of art a little bit, so they could be yours. I will share the contest link on my social media, but they could be yours if you win, and I'm gonna spend the rest of the afternoon working on it. Maybe I'll stream doing that, maybe I won't, I don't know. You guys are the only ones who've seen them. I've been trying to keep them a bit secret, but I'm very proud of them so far. All right, I will now sign off. I'm going to go have some lunch, and then I'm going to get working on sock monkeys. So thanks for joining me. Got several rows done on the vest, and hope you enjoyed learning about cabling without a cable needle. So until next time, bye.